But civil rights laws can also do something else. They can protect us in situations in which we affirmatively choose to come out about a characteristic. Let me use an example from disability rights law to explain this. I think when many folks out there in the world or in this audience hear me refer to a person with a disability, you may think of someone who uses a wheelchair or who is blind or deaf. You may not think of someone who has HIV infection or diabetes or cancer. Now, why is that? There are actually many reasons, and that is an entirely other speech. But one reason is that using a wheelchair or being deaf or blind is very manifest. You can't hide that. You can't pass. But you can pass if you want, if you have any number of medical conditions. For example, you don't know that I'm a person with anxiety disorder that is medicated unless I come out and tell you that. But if you are my employer and I come out and tell you that, I make myself vulnerable to you. You might have a great reaction. Oh, my daughter was just diagnosed with anxiety disorder. I would love to talk about what this has meant to you in your life. Like, that's sort of like when you tell your boss you're gay and she goes, oh my God, that's so great, my daughter just came out as gay, can I talk to you? Right? Then again, you might not get a great reaction from your boss, either about the anxiety disorder or about being gay. For example, your boss might say, oh really, anxiety disorder. Now, what exactly does that mean? And then suddenly, over the next few weeks, you notice you're not getting any plum assignments anymore. Here's the reality. When we disclose a characteristic about ourselves that is not otherwise manifest, we make ourselves vulnerable if the characteristic is stigmatized or different in society. Here's the key legal point that goes along with that reality. What our civil rights laws say is that there are certain characteristics which we as a country are going to provide protection if you come out with regard to that characteristic. For example, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, as recently amended, an employee can come out about a medical condition, anxiety disorder, heart condition, whatever, and be protected from being fired simply because he or she has come out about that fact. The law protects the person against discrimination on the basis of that impairment, thus providing at least the words on paper as a buffer against the vulnerability that comes with that disclosure. As with religion, the law also requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations to people with disabilities if they won't cause an undue hardship. And sometimes people come out about a medical condition simply in order to get a reasonable accommodation. So now consider this story. Imagine you're a person with diabetes and your blood sugar is very difficult to control. You have to do these daily blood sugar tests and insulin injections. The amount of insulin you need depends on how much you eat and how active you've been that day. Now imagine that you work for a bank and your new boss tells you you may not eat at your desk. One day your blood sugar becomes dangerously low. You come out to your boss as someone with diabetes and ask him if he can make an exception and you can eat something at your desk. He tells you to come back, quote, when you have an intelligent question to ask. Eventually, you pass out in the lobby of the bank building. And this is based on a real case. Now, diabetes did not define that woman, but it was certainly an integral part of her. So if she is to be treated as an equal, her diabetes has to be acknowledged, and the reasonable accommodation of allowing her to eat at her desk should have been provided. I believe the promise of our nation, not always fulfilled, but the promise of our nation, is that we will treat people as equals, with equal dignity and respect. So now let's consider what this view of equality could mean for LGBT people. And I'm going to ask you to consider that concept through the music and life story of the person whom you will be hearing from on this stage in just a few minutes, Shelley Wright. Now, as background, I had been a major country music fan for about 5 years, from like the late 1990s to about 2002. Trisha Yearwood helped me through a breakup 8 years ago. But my devotion to country music was waning just as Shelley Wright was breaking onto the scene, so I never actually listened to any of her music as her star was rising. And I had noticed some headlines in May or June about country music star comes out as gay, but I hadn't really focused. Well, I consider it a gift that Out and Equal put me and Shelley Wright on this plenary together, because I wanted to be sure I knew something about her before I showed up. So a few weeks ago, thanks to iTunes, I downloaded 3 albums, Let Me In from 1997 and Single White Female from 1999, and then fast forward and I downloaded the recent album Lifted Off the Ground from 2010. And then, thanks to Kindle and Amazon, I downloaded her memoir that had just been released, Like Me, Confessions of a Heartland Country Singer. And then, me being me, I listened to all 3 albums and read the book in 1 day. But it was intense. The book was intense in terms of conveying with incredible effectiveness and drama what it means to live with a secret. What it means to feel like your job, your dream, is dependent on not being fully who you are and not being seen in that fullness. And the book reminded me of the duality that we live in today. I have been totally out my whole professional life. With my partner now, I share my joys and my sorrows. We attend each other's professional events, except when we get a pass and we don't have to. We celebrate each other's successes. We bring each other to family gatherings. Have you noticed how you never get passes on those? Well, at least we don't. I take all this for granted, but when I read Shelley's memoir, I felt again the hurt one lives when one doesn't have